Every project starts with creating a mold, which will serve as the foundation for the entire process. I use transparent plastic for the mold because it allows me to see exactly what's happening inside when I pour the resin. I carefully attach the plastic to a base I prepared earlier using hot glue, which ensures the entire structure remains stable. The base is made of paper covered with transparent tape, providing moisture resistance and making it easy to remove any excess resin. After attaching the plastic, it's crucial to seal all the joints with silicone to make sure the resin won't leak out. I apply the silicone using a caulking gun and then spread it with my finger to fill in every gap completely. This step may seem simple, but it requires precision because even the smallest leak could ruin the final effect. Next, with the mold ready, I start preparing the pine cones. I select cones of different sizes and shapes to give the project a more natural and unique appearance. I begin by carefully cutting each pine cone in half using a bandsaw, which allows me to make precise and clean cuts. Once all the pine cones are cut, I take them and thoroughly clean each one with compressed air. This is a crucial step to remove any loose fragments and dust that could float in the resin. Sometimes, I have to repeat this step a few times to make sure everything is perfectly clean. When the pine cones are well cleaned, I move on to arranging them in the mold. This is the moment when I decide on the final look of the project. I carefully choose which pine cones to place in the center and which to place along the edges to add depth and a three-dimensional effect to the design. I use fast-drying superglue to fix them in place, ensuring that they stay securely positioned even when the resin is poured. Each pine cone is carefully glued in its designated spot, and I make sure they are all firmly attached and won't move during the pouring process. Now, I proceed with preparing the resin. I choose a white metallic pigment because it adds depth and elegance to the project. I slowly pour it into the mold, ensuring it spreads evenly over the entire surface, covering all the pine cones and filling every crevice. After the first layer of resin hardens, I prepare another batch. I add the white metallic pigment again, mix it thoroughly, and pour it over, ensuring the entire surface is covered evenly. It's crucial that each layer is perfectly smooth and free of air bubbles, as any imperfections could be visible in the final product. I try to maintain a consistent pace to prevent the resin from hardening too quickly before I can spread it evenly across the mold. Once the second layer of resin has hardened, I carefully remove the plastic shell of the mold. I use a multi-tool to gently trim any protruding ends of the pine cones from the other side, which helps create a more uniform surface. Next, I meticulously sand both sides to achieve a perfectly smooth finish. This is a time-consuming process, but very important, as sanding affects the final appearance and quality of the project. I sand in several stages, using different grades of sandpaper to get the best possible result. With the surface now perfectly smooth, it's time to shape the project. I use a bandsaw to cut out a perfect circle, ensuring that the ends of the pine cones are visible along the edges, giving the project an interesting, natural look. Each cut must be precise to maintain symmetry and aesthetics. Now it's time to add the numbers to the clock. I use a pre-prepared stencil that I secure to the surface with painter's tape to keep it from shifting. I apply glue to the designated spots and attach the numbers, which were 3D printed and filled with epoxy resin. Each number is carefully positioned to ensure a precise and readable clock face. After removing the stencil, I tape the entire clock face with 2 layers of painter's tape to prevent any resin from leaking during the next steps. Next comes another layer of resin. This layer is meant to embed the numbers inside the clock face. I pour the resin slowly, carefully checking for any air bubbles. This is a very important step, as it determines the final look of the clock. I leave the resin to harden, and once it's cured, I gently sand the edges to remove any imperfections. The next step is rounding off the corners with a handheld router. This is a crucial stage because it ensures a smooth finish, which will be covered with the final layer of resin. I carefully round off all the edges on both sides to ensure a perfectly smooth surface. I prepare the final layer of resin and spread it evenly by hand, wearing gloves, to make sure every part is fully covered. The resin must be distributed evenly to achieve a smooth finish and ensure all the details are well protected. This is a key step because the quality of this final layer will determine the overall appearance and durability of the project. When the resin is completely hardened, I proceed to remove any excess resin that may have dripped onto the back of the clock. I use a sander, gently smoothing the entire surface until it is perfectly even. Then, I drill a hole for the clock mechanism. To ensure precision, I use a 3D printed template that helps me accurately route the spot for the clock mechanism, ensuring it fits perfectly and stays secure. With the space for the mechanism ready, I protect the back of the clock where the open ends of the pine cones are exposed. I use a special oil with wax, which not only protects the surface but also highlights the natural wood texture, giving it an elegant appearance and ensuring long-lasting protection against moisture and other external factors. Finally, I install the clock mechanism. I carefully place it in the prepared hole, then tighten a screw to make sure everything is securely fastened. I attach the clock hands and set the correct time. The clock is finished and looks fantastic. If you enjoyed this project and this style of presentation, where I explain each step in detail, let me know in the comments. Or maybe you prefer something more dynamic with more close-ups? Let me know what you think. And if you want to see more projects like this, please give a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next episode.